Never before have we been faced with so many choices about how we should think, act, and live. How should we spend our time, our resources, and our money?
Blessed are the pure in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
How do we view ourselves and those around us?
Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
How can we find true success and lasting happiness?
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land.
How can we know what is right and true?
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God.
How can we make sense of suffering and loss?
Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
And those of us who want to continue with Jesus need to choose Him and choose each other in a deeper way.
Welcome to the choices we face.
Welcome to another week of The Choices We Face. We're very blessed today to have as our guest Al and Sally Cresta, and Peter Herbeck's with us as usual. Al and Sally are Catholic parents of 5 children, and Al is the host of a radio program called Kresta in the Afternoon that about 27 or 28 the Catholic radio stations across the country carry. He's also the general manager or the president of WDEO.
President and CEO of Ave Maria Radio.
Ave Maria Radio, and their base is here in the Ann Arbor, Michigan area, and WDEO 990 on your AM dial is the local station that they're carried through, although they're carried on many other stations as well. How'd you get to doing what you're doing?
Well, I think it comes back to a strong sense of calling. When I was in college, I had been involved in drug, sex, and rock and roll as a teenager, which led into New Age thought. And then through a remarkable series of divine interventions, came to realize that the Jesus of the New Testament was not the Jesus of the New Age movement. So I began following Jesus as he was portrayed in the New Testament. And it wasn't very long before...
Did you grow up as a Catholic, Al?
I was raised as a Catholic. And then by the time I was 14, 15, there were other... the hormones were working a lot harder than the Holy Spirit, I think, in my life. So I fell away easily. And but at Michigan State, I was confronted with the claims of Christ, and just seemed as though what I wanted to do with the rest of my life was tell people about the importance of Jesus, try to look at life through his light, and also knew at that time that I was called to marriage. Reading C.S. Lewis about one-fleshedness of the marriage relationship, husband and wife, lock and key, violin and bow, I knew that I wanted and felt called to be married. So those two things have really governed my life. I got involved in Christian bookstores to help propagate the faith, ended up being asked then to pastor a church as an evangelical Protestant, was asked to start doing radio. And that was 17, 18 years ago that I started doing radio. Sally and I have been married 27 years. So those two aspects of my life, two sense of calling.
Wonderful. That's wonderful.
Two sense of callings have stood firm so far.
Call to mission and call to marriage as a married man. Yeah. That's great. Now, at some point you came back to the Catholic Church, is that right?
Yes, that was after roughly 18 years in evangelical Protestant ministry.
What brought you back?
Well, there are a lot of the standard things that I know you've heard about. I was preaching through the book of Romans, and I began to realize that Romans was not the great Protestant epistle, the Magna Carta of the Reformation that I had been led to believe. That in fact it was very Catholic in its understanding of the way grace and faith work in our lives. I had never really considered the authority of Peter. And so the passage from Matthew chapter 16, verses 17 through 19 hit me, and I believe that Peter was in fact the rock upon whom Christ was building the church. But what really, at the deepest level, it was Jesus' prayer for unity in John chapter 17, which I began to think wasn't just a wish, that he really did and expect his people to be visibly one. And he had given the world the right to judge whether the Father had sent the Son by the degree of observable love and unity
That's
they
scary,
saw on the part of
isn't it?
Israel.
Yeah, really.
And it was, and I said, look, I believe that, so I need to fly my flag here. I'm really a Catholic. But that's the long and short of
Yeah,
it. That's what
sure.
the relation between unity and authority that drove me into the church. And Sally didn't come kicking and screaming.
Did you grow up a Catholic, Sally?
No, I was raised a Methodist
Uh-huh.
and became a Christian, actually, a committed Christian when I met Al. But when he started heading towards the Catholic Church, I think I'd already been prepared. I just fell in love with the Catholic Church. I fell in love with the liturgy. When I was first told what the Eucharist really was, it just hit me as true. And I thought, well, of course, it's got to be more than what I'd been taught. And from that point on, it was a big love affair with the Catholic Church and raising children in the richness of the liturgical year, and just the community of the parish. It has just been more than I could ever have imagined.
That's great. Well, you know, just being married for 27 years and having 5 kids is enough of a story to tell. But when I first met you, Al, you weren't in a wheelchair.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell us what happened.
Let's see, February 17th, 2003, I was, had been feeling ill. I had strep throat, I had pain in my left leg. My friend, Father Pat Egan, had sent over another friend, Gary Zamuda, to deliver communion to me. And I told Gary that I was feeling spiritually, a logjam. Not only did I have this physical thing, which I didn't know what it was at the time, but I had felt for a few months before very much in a rut spiritually. And getting older too, change becomes more difficult. So I told Gary, I said, I think the Lord is going to have to do something to break this spiritual logjam in my life.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. The following Monday, my son Nick and his friend Matthew led me to the van. Sally drove me to the emergency room. My blood pressure was so low that they couldn't administer any pain medication. They finally got my blood pressure up, gave me some pain medication, and next day doctors clustered around the bed and told me that I had necrotizing they thought I had necrotizing fasciitis, the flesh-eating bacteria.
Another thing that we read about occasionally. It sounds so scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a real surprise, and it was like getting mugged, really. I mean, doctors come in and they say essentially, okay, give me your leg or your life. What do you want?
Wow.
And I said, well, it's not a pleasant choice, but it's a fairly easy choice. So they took me in, and they couldn't save the leg. They told me if I didn't act within 20 minutes, I could die within an hour and a half to 3 hours.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
And why don't you say what you were going through at that moment?
Well, I was called, I was at home arranging babysitting for my toddler, and the nurse called and said I needed to come back to the hospital immediately. At the time, we thought he had sepsis. It had entered his bloodstream and he had blood poisoning, which is a pretty serious illness to have, and he was in the ICU already, but they were getting that under control. So I thought we knew what we were dealing with until I got down to the hospital, and they said, have you seen these lines on his leg? And I hadn't. It was growing an inch an hour. So it was very quick. I had just enough grace to accept it, give him a kiss, and send him off.
There's some dispute about the kiss. I remember the kiss too, and we were misted up, and I remember praying with the nurse there. I remember praying with you. But when I first brought up this thing about the kiss, you said that it was impossible because I had this mask on, and that you know, we could. I kissed somebody. And you were the nurse.
I said goodbye to him twice. Once in the
Okay.
ICU unit, once in the pre-op. And the pre-op, you had a mask on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we worked that out.
So what happened?
That was the last I was conscious for about 6-7 days. And when I came to,
Unconscious for 67
Yeah.
days, yeah.
yeah, when I came to, my daughter Alexis was there, and her now husband John was there, as well as my son Nick, I believe.
I had John in class at Franciscan
Oh, you
University
did?
for one
Oh.
of his theology classes. Yeah, good student, good Carmelite.
He is. He is. That's
Yeah.
right. He's doing his doctoral dissertation on the Eucharistic theology of St. John of the Cross.
great.
So, Sal was. We'll have to get into this too, but our one fleshed union spilled over into her life in a very frustrating and antagonistic way. When I woke up, one of the first things I learned is that Sally was in the hospital.
I was infected with the same strep bacteria in the same leg, but in a different way. In necrotizing fasciitis, the bacteria gets into the deep tissue and then to the bloodstream. In my case, it got into more shallow tissue right under the skin and was cellulitis. But it's an infection that was growing up my leg, similar to how his infection had been growing up his leg. And I was hospitalized 3 days later from him, and they watched me as though I had the same thing.
This is not supposed to be communicable either.
It's a very rare
So,
disease, the necrotizing fasciitis. So they had, they took me to the operating room thinking my first doctor said they might have to remove tissue from my leg, which is what they said with him. And I said, no, I don't think so. You can't do that. Luckily, the surgeon in the operating room said he didn't think it was what they said it was. So he just did a biopsy. And I was in the hospital for a week, but mine was much less severe than his.
you know, when you're married, you make these bold and audacious and noble and high-minded promises about fidelity, about till death do us part, in sickness and in health, and rich and poor. And you know, you realize you don't have the power to fulfill those promises. This was one of those times where we were both so needy that physically we couldn't even be with one another. And it was the children who kind of took control of our familial life together at that point.
Now also when you came to, you made a decision. I heard you share one time about how you were going to approach. Talk more about when you just came out of it and what the decisions were going on, the shock of what had happened to you. It's pretty powerful.
You said that you felt like God was going to break a logjam in your life.
Yeah.
Was this something He permitted to break that logjam?
Well, this gets to the heart of my inner experience of it. When I came to, my daughter Alexis, I asked her some questions, and she finally broke the news to me that my leg was gone. And she had to do some television interviewing and radio interviewing because people were asking. The word had gotten out that I was in the hospital, and people were praying.
Al, incidentally, is a well-known figure in this area, but across the country. I think he has the best Catholic radio program on the air, Kresta in the afternoon. I tell that to everybody.
Thank you.
They could get it on their website, on your website.
They can, at AveMariaRadio.net.
AveMariaRadio.net. You could tune into Al's program if you're not in an area which has a local station.
Thank you. So people were praying, and Alexis had to do some interviewing, and so she asked me, are you thinking, this was my first lucid conversation, I don't know, maybe it was 24 hours or so after I became conscious again. She said, are you ever asking yourself, why you? And the truth is that I wasn't. I mean, why not me is what I was thinking.
That's very good.
I had a lively faith. I have a loving and supportive family. I have a competent and compassionate staff that was able to step in and do the work. I've got a church that believes in God's healing power and is prayerful and is committed to intercession. I had thousands of well-wishers and friends and fans who were praying for me, and I felt really buoyed up by their prayers. I felt like the fellow in Mark chapter 2, the paralytic, who had been lowered down through the ceiling into Jesus' presence. Well, in my case, I was like a boat that had been run on the sand, and the prayers of God's people came under me and lifted me into Jesus' presence. And I felt positively full of grace at that time. I felt excited about life. And another thing too is it's not like one of these Civil War soldiers who takes a shot to the hip, musket shot, and they have to saw off his leg, and they only have whiskey for anesthetic, and then they pack it in mud or something like that and put him in a tent, howling. For me, I was in a great hospital, great medical care. The nurses were almost without any distinction. They were wonderful. And, I had a clean room, I had television, I had books, I had morphine. I mean, when I was 17, that would have been the ideal life. So really, I didn't feel as though I was suffering in that really tragic sense. I felt as though I was equipped by the Lord, not by natural temperament, but by the Lord, to face this thing and handle this thing.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful? Sally, how did you go through this, both for yourself and for Al, and what did you see happening in him and you and the family? How did this all impact you?
Well, to begin with, when I was waiting for the surgery to happen, and I was in the waiting room, I had two friends, dear friends, with me praying. A second set of friends, and my priest, Father Ed, a second set of friends came, not even knowing he was in surgery. They knew he was in ICU. And they brought a full-size image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And while he was in surgery, we were praying to Our Lady of Guadalupe. Now, the news that I heard from the doctors that they were going to amputate his leg, I didn't think was the answer I was looking for. Yeah. I thought, I was just praying, this is not the answer. But it was the answer, and it was a gracious answer. It was a severe mercy. And I really feel that the intercession of Our Lady of Guadalupe had a lot to do with how things went from there on, because during the surgery they said, we'll amputate his leg and we still don't know if he'll survive. So for 5 days his life was in the balance, and it was really the prayers and intercessions that saved his life.
Well, I would add to that, and again, only God knows, but I believe sometimes suffering on behalf of others is a very tangible thing, and I believe that the suffering that Sally went through here was directly related to what I was going through, and I think that her suffering, the same leg, same basic area, was her entering into my suffering, and there's good my spiritual imagination is such that I believe that it was her suffering that kept me alive. In our feast, our wedding is March 19th, which is the feast of St. Joseph, the husband. And I've always thought, since becoming Catholic, that she's a lot better off in the Mary role than I am in the Joseph role. But she was.
Catholic women are something else, aren't they? They're holy. They're holy women. So. Yeah.
Al, there was. I also heard you share at one point at a conference that you decided to find everything the Lord wanted for you in the experience as you were coming. I remember coming to visit you at the hospital, and you were describing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. The suffering, my daughter asks me, do you ask, why does this happen to you? And I said, no, why shouldn't it happen to me? Because again, within my worldview, within my framework, suffering is meant, especially as a Catholic now, suffering is meant to mold and shape us into the image of Christ. This world has a way of pressing us into its mold, And sometimes that mold has to be broken so that we can be remolded into the image of Christ. So I said from the very beginning that I didn't want to waste a moment of this suffering. It was vital that this would be made redemptive in some way. We stripped the room of all the cards from well-wishers and gifts, and I kept nothing but a crucifix and my books and Bible there, and tried to enter into some kind of retreat.
Wow.
I thought God was giving me loving discipline. I didn't feel judged or guilty because of this illness. But I did think Daddy loved me and he was giving me a real tough squeeze right now. And that he wanted me to shape up. He wanted me to go back and remember a little more clearly what it was like to walk in faith with him. As you get older, for me anyways, as I've gotten older, it's easy to rely a little bit on your track record, whether you've got money in the bank, whether you've got children who are coming along well, and things.
Or whether you're good at Catholic radio.
Whether you're good at Catholic radio.
You got a groove going, right?
That's right. And I think the Lord was telling me it's time for you to go back to living on the edge and living raw again. And I tell you, there was an experience going into the 5th surgery where this became very, very vivid.
You mean they had to go back and...
5 times I had to go back on this. You want to talk about this 5th surgery?
Well, there was some infections that they had to deal with. I think there were 2 major surgeries having to do with the amputation, but the infections just kept coming, and it was slow and a little frustrating. And one Sunday evening, I remember, it's not normally when they would do surgery, but it was severe enough that they had to schedule a surgery on a Sunday evening, and they even mentioned that they might even have to do more amputation, which scared us to death. This was a few weeks into it, and we felt that we had gone through the worst, and we just looked at each other and thought, Lord, we can't do this again,
Well, that's
so
exactly.
He had a little conversation with God on the way to the operating room.
I was on the gurney, and they're wheeling me towards the operating room, and I'm talking to the Lord, saying, I thought I took this pretty well, I had to take it laying down. I can't take it standing up. But Lord, I thought I handled this pretty well. I was able to affirm your name and your goodness through all of this. And 2nd surgery, 3rd surgery. I said, it's getting old now. We're into the 5th surgery. And what's there to learn here? I mean, what trial am I supposed to endure? And I got a very distinct impression from him. And he's saying to me, Al, you have done well. You're my child. But this is not, first of all, about a lesson learned. It's not about a trial endured. It's about a life lived. And I think he was saying to me, I was going to, for the remainder of my life, I would have to live without the accoutrements of the normal, respectable middle class props. Nothing wrong with those. I took this to be to me, but that I would have to always be remembering that I was walking on the edge with him.
Walking on the water.
Yes, that's right. Come out, come out. Very much. Very well said. That I didn't think of that, but that is Peter being called to walk out on the water.
There's a deep purification of faith going on, and trust and surrender is what the Lord's after. Is what you're saying.
That's right.
Not looking at the winds of the waves, but keeping your eyes on the Lord so that you don't sink.
Yeah, exactly. So it was powerful. Powerful. People sometimes ask if I've been discouraged, and Sally was very helpful here. She brought me a teaching of St. Ignatius Loyola, which said discouragement is never from God, because it hides the bright rays of faith and hope. And I was able to stay. I tend to be introspective, and I muse on these things because I believe God's telling a story in our lives, and I want to get the story right. But Sal said, no discouragement. And that helped me turn away from the introspection and towards offering up the suffering, even when I did it so badly. But don't be discouraged. It's St. Catherine of Siena says, you know, it's not the perfect work that God is after, it's the infinite desire. So that was a helpful thing. Don't let yourself be discouraged. Just turn away from those dark clouds. You might be disappointed. You will be disappointed. We don't suffer very well. We suffer imperfectly. But, you know, it's like, you know, me suffering well is like watching dogs on their hind legs, you know, walking. They don't do it very well, but you're surprised to find it done at all. and so for me, suffering well was like that, very imperfectly. But I'm imperfect in prayer. I get distracted in prayer. I don't stop praying. I can say, damn it, when I'm suffering physical pain. But I can say, I don't stop offering up to the Lord.
Yeah. Al and Sally, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story. I'm sure it's going to be a tremendous encouragement for folks who are with us today, but we're going to have to draw to a close.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You know, what we've just heard today is something very important. We all have suffering in our life, and the temptation to say, why me? And Al says, why not me? We can trust God's loving care for our life. We can trust Him in the midst of our suffering to bring good out of it and to have a purpose in it. We here at Renewal Ministries want to do whatever we can to help you surrender to the love and faith and trust in the Lord. I've written a booklet called What Happens When I Die, and we'd like to make it available to you at no cost, just for the asking. Call the 800 number or write to the address or access our website. We'll be happy to send it to you right away. Until next week, this is Ralph Martin and Al and Sally Cresta and Peter Herbeck wishing you the very best, a deeper faith, a deeper trust, a deeper love of God. Life is short, and the years fly by with increasing speed. Life is fragile, and the fate of all human flesh is death. At some point, we all ask, what happens when I die? Is there life after death? What will it be like? How does what I do in this life affect what happens when I die? My booklet provides some answers to these important questions by reflecting on what Scripture and the Church say about what happens when I die. To receive this free booklet, call Renewal Ministries at 1-800-282-4789 or visit us on the web at renewalministries.net.
For a university that's wholeheartedly Catholic, intellectually challenging, preparing students for hundreds of careers, with an Austrian campus where students encounter the roots of their faith. For a university committed to preparing the next generation of Catholic leaders, think Franciscan. Franciscan University of Steubenville. Find out more. Visit us on the web or call Franciscan University at 800-783-6220.